about to go.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I bear witness, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I bear witness, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I bear witness,
That was like,
in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, who came to us in the person of Master Father Muhammad. All praises are due. We thank him for leaving with us his messenger, Messiah, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, and we thank them both for leaving with us the honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. In their names, I greet you in the greeting words of peace and paradise. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the I Bear Witness podcast. I'm your host, Student Minister Randy Muhammad out of Muhammad Mosque No.11. This show right here is dedicated to bear witness to the efficacy, the correctness of the life-giving teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. We will be interviewing and having conversations with several believers who have been impacted by these teachings, and also some that are not in the Nation of Islam that have been impacted by these teachings and are doing great works in their respective areas of expertise. We're blessed this evening, to have my brother, a soldier in the Nation of Islam, my brother Ricardo X. Welcome to the I Bear Witness podcast. So,
yes, sir. Thank you for having me, brother minister.
Allah. Yes, sir. Honor, privilege, and a pleasure. How you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. Fired up.
Praise be to Allah. Yes, I'm happy that we're having this opportunity to talk. There's so much that we could talk about, right? There's a lot going on. Right off the top of my head, the thing that we were just speaking about, which was a tragedy that just happened yesterday.
Yes, sir.
A 13-year-old young boy was murdered by gun violence up in Mattapan.
Right.
What are your thoughts, man? And how do you feel when you hear something like that?
It's extremely tragic, extremely sad. I have a 15-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son, so he's in between that age, basically, essentially a baby. And I grew up in that neighborhood in Mattapan.
How old is your son?
My son's 10, about to be 11 in March.
Yes.
And just interacting with him, and you can still see he's still a baby mentality. He's just a child. No one should ever have to suffer through any kind of violence at all.
Right.
But our children, are left vulnerable out there. And according to reports, it looks like that it was a targeted attack.
Yes.
And it's just dumbfounded. It seems dumbfounded, like someone would actually target a 13-year-old, essentially a child, and murder him in broad day at 11:30 in the morning
on a Sunday morning.
We were having services at the time.
We was here at the mosque.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So it's real tragic, and
yes, sir.
I think it's apropos that we are having this conversation. And there's a lot of reasons why I wanted to interview you, and I think that your story is very important to the larger context of what we're talking about, which is the efficacy of the teachings and its ability to transform and reform our people.
Yes, sir.
I want to delve into your history a little bit, because you came into the Nation of Islam by way of the prison program. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And
officially,
yes, sir.
Officially.
So we could talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
And how long you been in the Nation of Islam?
I came home May of 1998 on parole.
Okay.
From from Massachusetts Department of Corrections State Facility.
How much time did you do in the
I did a total about 8.5 years, almost 9 years.
On what sentence?
It was an 8 to 15 year manslaughter sentence.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
And how old were you when you were sentenced to prison?
Officially sentenced when I was 18. I was arrested and charged when I was 6 days into my 17th birthday with first-degree capital murder at the time.
Wow.
Yes,
so
sir.
Again, why this is very relevant. So at 17 years old, you was out in the streets and caught this serious charge.
Yes, sir.
And went to prison for 8 years.
Yes, sir.
In that journey, you solidified your position within the Nation of Islam. So let's talk about that. So again, you were someone that is important to talk to with regards to the violence because you were there, right?
Yes, sir.
You was that teenager. Matter of fact, when you went to prison, the newspapers they had a name for you. Is that what they call you?
Right. It was myself, and I had a co-defendant as well in the case. Both of us were arrested at the same time, and he was a year older than me, so he was 18, I was 17. Both very young looking, probably young teenage looking. They called us babyface killers.
Wow.
So that was like the shock in the headlines at the time, and they showed us, of course, in handcuffs, etc.
Yes.
Parading us into the jail. Yes, sir.
Babyface killers.
Yes, sir.
So you can share insight into that as we wrestle with the reality of a 13-year-old boy being murdered.
Yes, sir.
And talk about the mentality of our youth. And what was your mentality? What was going on in your environment at that time that kind of led to you being labeled a babyface assassin?
Yes, sir. I would say at that time, we're talking late 80s, 88, 89, early 90s, where there was just a surge of violence among young Black and Latino people within the inner cities all over. Boston in particular really felt that between 90 to like 93, 91 and 92, having the highest murder rates that the state's ever seen, particularly in the city of Boston. And things were transitioning during that time. But it was the height for us in this city of the crack cocaine epidemic that affected our people. There was also legislation, and not to go too much into it, but just to give you a perspective, or the people a perspective of the environment what led to where we're at today and what happened to me, where Hillary Clinton and now President Joe Biden were lobbying and passed a crime bill, which was basically essentially to destroy the Black and brown families of America by removing the young men, and calling us super predators, and that we should be brought to heel like a dog. So the headlines were glorified and were sort of scaring the public for young Black and Latino men already. So the movies like Boys in the Hood came out, movies like Juice, those kind of, and then the music scene changed too. And within the city, as a young man, 13, 14, 15, we went from playing Pop Warner sports like football, baseball, basketball, to now toting guns and selling crack cocaine on the very corners that we were throwing footballs and playing as regular neighborhood kids.
Stop right there, because
yes, sir.
There's a lot there, right? So
yes, sir.
You was one that ended up, selling crack, carrying
yes,
guns,
sir.
But again, as a teenager and trying to understand the mind of our youth, and bridging that gap, what was the correlation between playing in the park with Pop Warner and then jumping off the porch, selling drugs and carrying guns. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because we have to understand that. We have to understand how we're losing our young people,
yes,
and
sir.
our young young boys in particular are losing their innocence and are becoming hardened street. And we want to change that, right? We have to change that narrative. So in order to change that reality, we have to understand what led to that and what's the mentality of the young people that are picking up guns.
Yeah, I think for me, where it changed for me, when it no longer became cool, you know, to be playing sports in school or any of the community centers that they had going on. A lot of the funding was just cut, you know, and so it was no longer cool to go and play basketball at the park anymore. At the time, a movie came out by the name of Colors, and it was about Crips and Bloods in LA. And that became kind of like a fad. You know, we started wearing bandanas and stuff like that. And I remember going to go see that movie with a bunch of my friends and being dropped off by our parents or whatever. And we had our bandanas in our pocket because, you know, if we wore them then, we were like, again, 13, young. We probably would have got reprimanded by our parent. We went there and we put our bandanas on. We watched that movie, and it just became cool now to sort of have a violent trend to you. So it was like we automatically just started fights with the rival street that we used to play football against. Now they were rival street. They were a different set now.
Yeah.
So the language changed, the culture changed, the shift changed dramatically. And then also what came with that was, of course, the drugs. The drugs hit hard. The marijuana started to really flow through the inner cities. We started the introduction of blunts and the crack cocaine. And now we see a lot of the older cats, the older fellas in the neighborhood were now dressing, you know, with expensive gear. Back then was the 8-ball leather jackets and the big gold chains and the Gucci chains. And we wanted that, you know, and, you know, a street slang, like we think, you know, how can we get put on? There's something like that. And it was very easy. It was very easy to get drugs, and then we started making money.
You mentioned two things there. You know, one is the culture.
Yeah.
You know, and it's interesting that we have to understand how our youth are being directed, misguided by the culture.
Yes,
then
sir.
It was Hollywood and the movies, but also one of the big contributors was hip hop.
Yes, sir.
Which is the most influential culture in the world.
Right? Yes, sir.
You know, and so, you know, there was a move to turn the culture, which initially started off as positive and conscious and about knowledge itself,
right,
into the self-destructive genocidal culture where we glorifying drug dealing, drug selling, gang banging, and so forth and so on. And so, you know, it's key that we understand that we have to pay attention to that. You know, we have to pay attention to the culture, you know, and then the other aspect of it is the influx of drugs,
right,
which we know now that it was our very own government,
yes, sir,
right, that was flooding Black communities with crack cocaine via
yes, sir,
the CIA,
right,
that was involved in the Iran-Contra scandal,
right,
where they was bringing in crack, it was bringing in military-grade weapons,
right,
and giving them and selling them in the Black community to fund their unjust wars. So, you know, we have these two entities, which is Hollywood and those that control the culture through music, right, that have intentionally targeted our people to promote a culture of violence. And then you have the government that's bringing the drugs in, that's bringing the guns in, that contributed to the climate where a young 13-year-old child, you know, could now be influenced and manipulated into entering into this culture that really, in some cases, you can't get around it. Right? It's all around you.
Right.
And so we see young, sweet, innocent children that can turn into baby-face assassins.
Right.
You know.
Yes, sir.
And so we look at that and we see that happening today. Now, the flip side of that is this: that, you know, those that are committing these crimes, you know, that Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden,
right,
call super predators,
right,
you know, that those very same ones that are considered incorrigible or beyond reform have the ability to be transformed.
Yes, sir.
And that's your story.
Yes,
right?
sir.
So what was it? And talk about that transformation, right? So now you're a teenager. You're going into prison, the big house, right?
Yes, sir.
With grown men, with you know, killers and rapists and whatever in prison.
The so-called incorrigible.
The so-called incorrigible.
One concentrated
put all
area.
together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you were 17.
Yes, sir.
In that environment. Talk a little bit about that, and how did the evolution of you, Brother Ricardo, how did that happen within, you know, the prison system?
Yeah, if I may, I backtrack a little. Leading up to my arrest and going to prison, that culture shift that we talked about, and I kind of want to go back a little and talk about my first influence or my first interaction with the nation.
Yes.
Right, which was through a family member that was heavy into the music scene at the time, was Public Enemy, really Public Enemy, and he was rapping and all that, and had always had a positive thing to say to the youngsters in the neighborhood. Brother Ricardo, who's your relative.
I think I know that guy.
Yeah, it's your brother.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So he was always, you know, had something to sort of curb our thinking, you know, and we looked up to him because he was in the rap game, but he brought a different perspective, and he was a member of the Nation of Islam, and he had invited me out, actually gave me the message to the black man. At the time, I was maybe 13, 14, young, came to the mosque, Muhammad Mosque No.11 here in Boston, Massachusetts, and I just remember how I just remember how powerful and how enlightening it was. And, you know, the Holy Quran talks about the shock of the hour, right? Surely is a grievous thing. I think that shock for me was a beautiful thing because I came from a Catholic, Christian, Latino background who really mystifies God, right? Yeah. So that I'm saying that because later on during my incarceration, that came back to me, that experience, that influence of the brothers, and seeing the structure of the mosque and the subjects that were being discussed in the mosque were not being discussed anywhere else. Yeah. The current status of what was going on in our neighborhoods, and we knew as young men what was going on, and the warning that was given to us then of the traps that were laid out by this government, this enemy against our young men and boys, in which I became and fell victim to, and victimized those in my community as well.
So the seed was planted.
The seed was planted early on.
The teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, you was exposed to those teachings.
Yes, sir.
And
early on,
as a teenager, you was
and I knew right then and there. I knew right then and there this is what we needed at that young age. This is what we needed. And I remember going to a youth retreat, so to speak. At the time, the mayor was a gentleman named Mayor Raymond Flynn, and it was in Jamaica Plain of Massachusetts. And they were talking about gangs, and they had this symposium about how to curb the violence, and it was a shooting and killing almost every day. And I remember saying at that meeting as a youth in the crowd, saying that you should speak with Minister Don Muhammad, and that would solve all your problems that you have in the street. As Allah is my witness. This was before I got in, so the influence was very powerful, and Allah has made me the kind of person that's an extrovert. You know, I wear my emotions on my sleeve. I'm high energetic. So what comes to mind, I say. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. It's got me in trouble for sure. But I just said it. So that, always stayed in my mind. I always knew that the answer to our prayers, or the answer to the problems and the solutions to the problem for our people, I knew at a young age, was the teachers of the Nation of Islam. I knew that.
Oh, praise to
and then going fast forward and getting in trouble. I don't know if you want me to go into the actual situation that led to it.
At this point, we're gonna pause right now.
Yes, sir.
Because this is a test run.
Okay.
And we're gonna have to come back. We're gonna come back. We tested out the equipment here. We've been on for 19 minutes and 53 seconds.
Yes, sir.
But we're gonna bring you back and have a full-on discourse.
Yes, sir.
On the transition. But brother, with that, I thank you for your time and your attention and coming out and this work. We got to talk about.
Yes, sir.
Maybe next time you come, you got to bring, the award, brother. You're the only
the national.
You're the only nationally
That's
recognized.
Right.
No, nationally recognized, award-winning.
That's right.
Peacemaker.
That's right.
Stay tuned for the next
Graduate.
Yes.
That's right.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
With this podcast.